Peggy and Zach. Good to see you both. It's really nice to see people I haven't seen in a long time. It's exciting, even if it's in Zoom. So thanks all for coming. Bobby Joe, are you set for me to call the meeting to order? You're recording? Perfect. All right, so I'm going to call the meeting to order at 4:34
Casey,
p.m.
just a point of personal privilege.
Yes.
Tom, my name is Joel.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Okay, Gio. Right.
I wanted, because Tom Gio, is with us for the first time, I wondered if we could go around and introduce ourselves and our roles, maybe say just a few words about how long you've been on the VEHI board, and perhaps what excites you or satisfies you with regard to your service. I'll start with board members, but I'll also go to staff. And I will start with Joel, and then Zach, then Peggy, then Lisa. That's the order you are on my screen.
I'll try to follow the instructions.
Yeah.
My name is Joel Cook. I've been on this board off and on, but mostly on since the turn of the century. I was involved as general counsel of Vermont NEA in the 1990s in developing the legal documents. I didn't have a direct role, but an indirect role in creating VEHI's legal documents. And I guess I've been on the board since becoming Vermont NEA's executive director in 2000. Then I retired at the end of 16 and was brought back for this new iteration of the board a couple of years after that. I guess I'm invested in this, one way or the other. I'm invested in making sure that the people we serve are treated fairly, and well, fairly in more senses of the word than just one. I guess if we were to do some research the way Joe Zimmerman used to when he was at Visbit, we'd learn just how large relative to our population in Vermont VEHI actually is. We serve 7% of the population of the state, and so we're a big dog whether we want to be or not in a small yard, and the beat goes on. And the issues, I'll say this because we always get into these disputes for some reason or other, but the issues that divide us are far fewer than the issues that we share in common in this business. With that, I'll pass it on.
Zach.
So I have a much shorter tenure than Joe. Joe, I've been on since, I think I had some conversations in May, and maybe June was my first actual meeting. I think that for me, I like being part of, I enjoy the dialogue, and it can be sometimes hard because it's this constant balance between, I think everyone agrees we want to serve as many people as we possibly can in as rich a way as possible. And it's just, how do we, I'm always trying to come to a better understanding of how do you do that and keep the whole thing afloat simultaneously to make sure there's an opportunity to serve as many people as well as possible. And I'm still in a learning process to understand that as richly as I want to. So I really appreciate the opportunity to work with folks around having that dialogue, which can be, it can be challenging to try to figure out where that tipping point is on any particular issue. But I've really enjoyed my first couple of months here and appreciate the dialogue.
Thanks, Zach. Peggy?
Hi, I'm Peggy Maxfield, and I teach 7th grade math this year at Brattleboro Area Middle School. And it's a fun and exciting time.
Yeah.
And so I joined the board when it was reconfigured 2 years ago. So I think I'm just starting my 3rd year on the VEHI board. And this was a great opportunity when I was asked to kind of step up and try to help be part of a solution. health insurance, healthcare is such an important issue. And so this was just a great opportunity. And it certainly is, as Joel said, we really do have so much more in common. And we have to keep going back to that, but we get there in the end. So it's been a real pleasure working with everybody and learning so much as I go. So welcome.
Lisa has low bandwidth, so she's going to show her face on a limited basis.
See, this may work. I'm hoping this will work. I joined just around the same time as Zach, maybe a little before. For 30 plus years, I've always been involved as a teacher and student advocate. And healthcare is probably one of the pivotal issues of our age. And that sounds grandiose, but if we don't take care of our people, then we don't have anything. So, I just think it's really, really important. And I'm flattered to try to help in any way to come to a positive, some positive solutions. That's that.
All right, I'm
I'm gonna turn myself off.
Okay, I'm going to turn to staff and then we'll let Gio close. Oh, I should say me first, and then I'll go Bobby, Joe, Chris, Jonathan, Mark, order on my screen. I'm Tracy Rend. I have been on the board since somewhere around 2013. I came on the board when VEHI was being restructured as a result of changes in regulation associated with the Affordable Care Act. And I, at that time, thought what we might be doing was transitioning VEHI out of existence and into whatever the outcome of a statewide or national response to the Affordable Care Act might be. And like Peggy, I just wanted to and Lisa, make a positive difference in something that's important, and perhaps naively, but perhaps more optimistically, believe we can do better in the world of health insurance and how we support the people we serve in successfully getting the care that they need at a price they can afford, so that they can live healthy, happy lives. So that's why I'm here. How about Bobby Joe?
Hi, I'm Bobby Jo Sauls. I was brought into VEHI back in 2016 to help with the 2018 transition to the new health plans. I was with Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and I got hired on to work for VEHI and Visbit in 2018, I guess. So I've been around healthcare since 1994, way back when I worked for the VACE insurance program with the Chambers of Commerce. So definitely an important thing to me as well.
Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Roberts. I'm the manager of finance for Visbit and therefore under contract to VEHI as well. I have been with Visbit since 2001, so I'm just 2 months shy of my 20 years of service. When I first took the job at Visbit, I think a couple of things that attracted me weren't necessarily the health program, but I love the nonprofit mission. And being a 9th generation Vermonter, I am very vested in the community here, related to 2/3 of them, I feel like. So, I've just always loved our mission, both Visbit and VEHI, because we serve a nonprofit mission and we serve Vermonters and the people that support us. So don't plan on going anywhere soon.
That's good news, Chris. John?
Thanks, Tracy. John Steiner. I am starting my 4th week as president of Visbit, but I've got a 30-year career working with mostly cities and towns, but also schools in the insurance world. Like Chris, I've always been attracted to the mission. I've never really wanted to work for just an insurance company. I'd rather do something where I feel like I'm giving back and doing some good. I've been a school board member myself, and my wife was a teacher and now is an assistant superintendent. So we're pretty involved in education. And the thing I like is again, the mission and the business side of it, because I always say, no margin, no mission. So I like both of those, keep my hands in both of those things.
Thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Tracy. Good evening, folks. I'm Mark Hage. I'm the Director of Benefit Programs at Vermont NEA and also a VEHI Trust Administrator for, I think this is my 20th year. I can't compete with Chris on the generational lineage competition. She's got me beat by about 8.5 generations as a Flatlander from New York. Let's see. So I guess for me, simply put, making sure people have access to affordable, high quality, equitable healthcare is as much a moral or ethical imperative as it is a professional one. And being able to be a part of that story and struggle really, because it is a very, very hard time right now for all of us and for our society and for the healthcare system. And being a part of that is very important to me and always will be. And this is the avenue through which, or one of them at least, where that finds expression in my life.
Thank you, Mark. Gio, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm currently, professionally, I'm a farmer. I used to be a school teacher many, many moons ago, but I followed the money into farming. I've served on my local school board for, I don't know, 13 or so years. And I was also very active on the Vermont School Board Association board. And most recently, I was on the statewide healthcare bargaining commission. So I actually left that seat to go take this one. And there's really nothing I can add. I mean, everything everybody said is exactly how I feel. So I think Peggy said it, that we have a lot more in common, which is true with all issues. You know, I don't care what it is. If you're a Trump supporter, we still have more in common with each other than we don't have in common. So anyway, so yeah, I'm looking forward to, I got a big learning curve ahead of me. There's a lot to learn.
Well, welcome, Gio. And again, it's nice to see everyone. I think it's fascinating that we have a very nice blend of, if we were cheeses, aged cheeses, as well as some really fresh right off the farm, literally, new cheeses to our charcuterie board. So we should be a rich and
Man, you might want to not go much farther with that image.
rich, satisfying team. Yeah, okay. Some analogies are better than others.
It worked.
But I'm going to jump into a review of the agenda. I believe that we have one item to add, which is a review of the Vermont NEA Q2 quarter 2 report for FY21. And that's not a surprise to Mark, so it should be okay to add. Are there any other agenda issues that anyone would like to raise at this time? Hearing and seeing none, I would entertain a motion to add the Vermont NEA second quarter report, probably to a number 7 under the agenda items.
So moved.
Oh, I'll second Peggy's move.
Okay, Peggy moved that we add that agenda item and Zach seconded it. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I'm just gonna, because we're a 6-member board, I'm gonna take a shot at having everybody just say yay or nay. But if needed, we can go to a hand raise or some sort of alternative, a roll call vote if there's any question. So all those in favor of approval, please say aye.
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 'Aye. 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 'A
Abstentions? Thank you. Even when I can't hear your voice, I can see your lips saying aye. All right, the next item of business is public comment. It does not appear to me that we have any members of the public here to address the board. If I'm mistaken, please speak up. All right, let's move on to a review and discussion of documents. At our last meeting, we spoke briefly about the several operation and organizational documents and indicated a wish to, and discussed a wish to go slightly more deeply into some of the key documents that have been raised in previous meetings over the past, I'll say 18 months. For continued discussion and review, and they are the mission and decision guidelines and the conflict of interest policy. I'd like to start with a look at the mission and decision guidelines. It's linked in the agenda. It's available in Dropbox. It is in the board packet that you received. And we discussed at the last meeting a request for folks to take a few minutes and read it between meetings. And what I'd like to do is just take a few minutes and ask you to revisit the mission and do a modified 3-2-1 kind of strategy where, as you review the mission, make a note to yourself of 3 phrases that you feel strongly about as a priority, perhaps items that are timeless and we need to make sure we sustain and preserve. 2 areas where the board might need to build further, and 1 area where you have a question. So an adult version of the 3-2-1 strategy that many of us have used instructionally. And I'll give you 5 minutes and then check in and see if you need more time or we're ready to discuss. So to 4:56. We have about 1 minute left. If you think you need time, unmute, more time than that, please unmute and tell me so, and we will do that. Okay, team, I'd like to transition to a little discussion and reporting out of your read. And because the screen is showing the mission and I want it to stay up there, Bobby Joe, so thank you, and please leave that up there. The best way for me to know if you have something you want to say is for you to open the participants menu, which is available at the bottom of your screen. If you scroll down and just click on participants, it will show up. And if you click on the bottom of that menu, raise hand, I will see that you have something to say. I thought I'd start by asking folks to report out on just one of the things that you identified as something you feel strongly about, you agree with. It's something that you feel is a timeless element to our mission that we ought to maintain as a priority.
I might need to update my client because I don't have the participant hand thing.
Go for it.
So go ahead with my input.
Yes, please.
All right. So I'd say the one is interesting, and it's great when you have things that you think are key that you hadn't necessarily frame it exactly this way. But the phrase in number 2 around the 3 essential components, and number 2, and the phrase give individuals and families confidence. That idea of having confident families that feel like they can do what they need to do in the other parts of their lives as a result of the programs we're providing. I think that's a really important idea and not always the way in which I think about it.
Nice, thank you. Speak up. Gio?
Sure. To dovetail onto what Zach said, and for the same reasons, finishing out that one, support and resources they need to lead healthy, productive lives. For the same exact reasons that Zach stated that.
Peggy?
The very first one, and under the 3 essential components, a range of employee benefit plans. I think choice, and I think that everybody's different. And so I think that that's going to be an important piece going forward.
Thank you. Lisa?
That's exactly what I was going to say, Peggy.
Nice. Joel, would you like a chance to share? You're muted. Joel, you're muted, and I know you're saying something important.
Actually, I was blithering.
Oh,
And I started by saying exactly what Lisa said, but that would be unfair because the assignment was to come up with 3 things. And so I'll skip to my favorite one for purposes of the board and not for the mission of the organization itself is the notion of there actually being in place for these now multiple decades, a solid partnership in concert with both VISBIT and Vermont NEA. That's why we're here. And that is the only reason we're here, is because people were able to develop, in fact, some form of partnership among these organizations 25 years ago. And if it dissolved, if it were dissolved, to word this negatively, then I don't know what would happen to all of the rest of this mission on behalf of, what I said before, the 7% of the population of the state.
How about the notion of areas that we can build upon? Are there areas of the mission that folks highlighted or marked where we might want to work further?
Tracy, when you say work further, what do you mean?
I was thinking about areas where our work plan might need to dedicate some time to either further fleshing out that part of the mission or further fleshing out how we support that mission. So for example, one of the things I noted, one of the two that I noted was was number 3 under adhering to the following guidelines, that we will maintain the fiscal integrity of the organization so it can meet its current and future obligations to members. We do an amazing job at that, and Chris is a rock star. I sense that we're in a very dynamic economic context, however, so it's something that I thought I would want to keep in the back of my mind anyway, with regard to how we maintain that fiscal integrity that's stellar at this point. So it's not necessarily build, but make sure that it adapts to the changing times and changing circumstances. Lisa?
Since I seem to be piggybacking on everybody, I wanted to reiterate what Joel said about the solid partnership between school boards and their employees' representatives, because without that, we really can't make any progress whatsoever. And I think that's kind of pivotal.
Thank you.
And that's that.
Any other areas to build? Peggy?
I really see it as such a crucial point of what our work is here, but it's number 1 under the adhere to the following guidelines, that we offer employee benefit programs and services that are valuable to the members and make a meaningful difference. I think that's what we do, but I think that is the crux of what we do. And so I saw that one as a continuing.
Yeah, I marked that one too, and think there's areas we could build there as well. I wonder how we know, for example. Any other areas to build?
Tracy, if I could jump in.
Sure.
So I would think the board would want to pay attention to number 3 on the essential components, particularly with a new administration. We really do not know what's going to be happening federally, and we need to keep our eye on it and make sure that we keep our members informed and keep up with any changes, because we could see a lot of different things coming at us from the federal government.
Great, thank you. That was also on one of the 2 things I noted for building too. And again, I was thinking back to starting under the Affordable Care Act and what the regulatory context was then and how it's changed so much. And then wondering what's new and what do districts need to know in order to administer plans responsibly. How about areas where people have questions? I question the whole first section of the mission, which summarizes the history. And for example, it says that for more than 2 decades. I think now it could say more than 3 decades. This was last updated in 2014, and we're getting close to another decade. So I just wondered if we decide to dive into revising the mission as a board and refreshing it, if we should be intentional about writing it in a way that's timeless.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's in a mission statement, it's not important information to know how long the organization's been in existence.
Any other questions? Jonathan, you still have, is this an old hand or a new hand? Old hand. Zach, old hand or new hand? You did it.
New hand. And I think about some of the conversations that that I was on the tail end of. So as John was leaving and I was coming in, there was some dialogue about information. And so the question that I had, I think it's going to be a question we always deal with is, where is it here? I'm looking for something about unbiased information. And my question I had was, is there such a thing? And so that kind of, so I think the question is, and if the answer to that is there isn't necessarily, it's then how, then that will continue to be a challenge as we try to assess what is objective, we'll call it quote unquote objective information, as we try to navigate the different parts of what we're trying to pull off. So.
Great question. Is there any, Chris?
Hi, if you don't mind, I just had one thought, and I don't really know how I feel one way or the other about this, but I just know that lately we've had a lot of conversation about, having to go out to rebid for Vermont state retired teachers system. And, they've talked about at times leaving VEHI. So I guess I question a little bit when we look at the top of our mission and it says that we provide them insurance and that they're in our mission twice as an organization. And I just don't know if they partner with us the way we partner with them. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's appropriate to be there, but maybe it isn't. I'm just not sure. So it's a question.
Thank you for that question. Any other thoughts on the mission under any of the categories of your 321 read?
Yeah, I mean, I like under the number one, under the essential components, just the words at the end of the first one: cost effective, affordable, and high quality. Mm-hmm. I'm really wedded to all three of those words.
Anybody else? Any other thoughts? We've had a standing request from several years ago to revisit and refresh the mission. I appreciated just the discussion and reflection of individual board members on the mission that we just had, and hearing one another connect with our purpose as a board. So thank you for that. I would like to get a sense from the board about whether this should be a review of the mission, should be a refreshing, should be a more formal action step at some point in the coming year's work plan.
Well, I don't get the sense that people had any great beefs against what was up here. So I'm not sure we should be spending a whole lot of time correcting what people don't see as a glaring deficiency. I think the time frame probably could be corrected, but it's not the end of the world if it stays,
Not
the
good.
2 decades thing.
Okay. Zach?
Yeah, I'm of two minds. I mean, I think, we're looking at something that's a 5-year-old, no more, 6, 7-year-old document now. Jeez, what year am I in? Which sometimes means it's probably due to be cycled to be looked at. I also appreciate, I'm sure many of you, like I, have been on committees to rework mission statements. And it's a great time suck that very often gets you back to where you originally were in the first place. So I think I might be getting pulled in Geo's direction in terms of kind of the approach.
Joel?
Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but if you give me an opening, you'll know I'll walk right through it.
You
I don't
popped up
care.
there. so-
I don't care a whole lot. I think the mission, the nouns that we've all cited are the nouns that are going to find their way back into a document, whether we create it anew or simply try to revise this. And the time frame doesn't matter to me. When we wrote it, we wrote for more than 2 decades. Well, that stands the test of time for the next few centuries. So I think we have enough to do, frankly, than spend our time recreating a document that will undoubtedly use 80 or 90% of the same words.
And Peggy?
No, I'm on board with everyone else. I really just noted that as I took notes on what people were saying, we addressed almost every single piece of writing on here. So I think we're good.
Great. I sense a consensus that we can live with and support, and people feel strongly about the mission as it is. And although, as Geo notes, there are a few things that could be tweaked and improved, I agree with Joel's memory that the intent was to write something that was more timeless, more like the Constitution. Amendments might be needed someday, but if we had done a good job, it would see us through. And so I'm completely satisfied that you are satisfied.
So,
And go ahead.
so would it be out of, we could solve Zach's little dilemma about the document being 7 years old if we readopted it. We don't change any of the words, we just readopt it tonight. And then we can change the date on the bottom so for future boards will know that we actually looked at this and decided we wanted to stay with this.
That's a great suggestion. We actually do that with some policies at school, and could review and affirm the document as of tonight if folks are open to doing that.
Tracy, excuse me, did Lisa get a say? Oh, I'm not sure if we heard from her.
She didn't, but she does know how to raise her hand. She successfully raised her hand, so.
I just wanted to make
Good, thank you.
Lisa, I do want to give you a chance if there's anything you want to add.
I think that we hit all the key points that I had marked, and they look good to me. I thought, thank you.
So I would entertain a motion to note that this mission was reviewed and affirmed as of January 25th, 2021.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I saw Peggy first. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. All right. We also wanted or committed to taking some more time to look at the conflict of interest policy. And I want to note 2 things. One is that we discussed reviewing or sharing our conflict of interest statements, which are completed annually. And second, I wanted to acknowledge yet another item that we talked about pre-COVID. I think I'll just categorize everything as pre-COVID era discussions. And in the last almost year, our focus just went to other things. But we did make a commitment in 2019 that in 2020 we would revisit the policy, and in particular have further conversation about item number 8, which is an area that we have struggled with as a board quite a bit. Bobby Joe, you shared with us the conflict of interest statements that you had so far, which were mine, Peggy's, Joel's, and Elizabeth's, Lisa's.
And I do have Zach's now as well.
Okay, and we'll get one for Geo.
Yes.
Okay. And the ones I haven't seen, basically, we've all indicated that we have no conflict of interest. Is that true for Zach as well? Peggy very thoughtfully clarified that she does receive health benefits through VEHI. We have previously determined as a board that that amounts to receiving a benefit that generally is available or received by individuals in general, so hasn't excluded someone from participation and voting.
Tracy, this was such a in-depth discussion we had a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I was driving a lot of it, and so I don't want to drive a lot of it anymore. The non-disclosure statement, or the disclosure statement, excuse me, asks us if we have any financial interest,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to a conflict of interest. And so from where I sit and the way we resolved this last year, we concluded that those of us, and I'm not among you anymore, who receive health insurance through VEHI have in fact a financial interest. But because the definition of conflict of interest excludes, as you suggested, decisions around items that where the effect is general in nature and that we don't have an individual nature, that despite the financial interest that we disclose on this statement, each of us concludes that that does not constitute a conflict of interest. So that the disclosure is about financial interest, and then the secondary discussion or consideration is whether that financial interest constitutes a conflict of interest as that term is now defined. Not a big deal. Nobody in my experience in this organization has ever been confronted by anybody other than in this discussion about whether there's a conflict of interest brewing. But as a matter of definitions, that's, I think, the approach that we really ought to be using.
I agree that, and maybe didn't say it as clearly as you did, but that we had determined that membership or receiving health insurance benefits through VEHI, either the actives or the retirees for that matter, is of no greater benefit than to others generally affected or impacted by the opportunity. So I do agree with that. I don't want to ignore our previously identified work. I certainly don't want to embark on it tonight, but
Me neither. Agreed. Yeah.
Yes, but do want to highlight that the conflict of interest policy, item number 8, is an area that we identified as something that needed significant further study and discussion. It says that any organization with a designated seat on the VEHI board that's also receiving financial compensation under contract with VEHI shall represent their organization in any discussion of their organization's contract and shall abstain from making any motion or voting on the organization's contract as a member of the VEHI board. That, again, we've committed to review that in 2020. I would love to hear the board's inclinations as to putting this on the agenda or on a future agenda for more in-depth study. It certainly is a provision that hasn't been adhered to, at least with regard to the most recent contractual or service agreement discussions and decisions that we've made. But I'm hoping that as homework between meetings, between this and an upcoming meeting, we can map the essential work of the year, not fresh in the meeting because, or the meeting, the mission rather, because we've just affirmed that, but also identify other work that needs to be a priority and wanted to be sure this is mentioned.
Tracy,
Yes, Joel?
I don't know, actually, I don't know how to put that little hand up. Somebody can write me in the chat how to do that. I'll be happy to do that. I don't want to take our time here now. I think it's fine for us to put this on a later agenda, but as all but Gio, Zach, and John well know, we have talked this through to death. And you also know my consistent position and conclusion is that this paragraph has no force and effect whatsoever, and in fact never did. It's entirely inconsistent with the bylaws definition of conflict of interest. No one raised an objection last year on the multiple votes on the agreement that's referenced in there in paragraph 8. So I let it go. But for my money, that paragraph never had meaning, never had the force of enforceability, and it should be deleted. But I don't want to do that now. I don't want us to get sucked into another lengthy discussion about the same issue, because it took hours and hours and hours of our valuable time. I'll be happy to send a memo through, I guess through Bobby Joe. Maybe we can distribute something that I wrote a year ago about this and see if that helps.
Well, let's see if you and I can figure out a work plan and when and how we can clarify that, because it remains an area that has taken a lot of time, that is significant with regard to decision making and how we work together. And it's also significant with regard to how we present ourselves as paying attention to actual and perceived conflicts of interest. So
I just want to point out, Tracy, that there was no actual or perceived conflict of interest until the prior board inserted this paragraph that doesn't relate to the definition of conflict of interest. So again, and we shouldn't get sucked into it tonight.
Yep, I agree. I agree that we disagree, and I am very familiar with your interpretation.
I don't like the innuendo, but that's all right. Let it go.
So
All right.
we are going to take this up again.
It seems like we're probably.
That's the bottom line, Tracy.
Yeah.
We're going to put this on the work plan somewhere.
I would like to, yes.
Yeah, I think we should, because it's very clear that, I mean, as Joel said, he'd like to see it taken off, but as long as it's on, I think it's enforced. So I think we have to figure this out.
Well, but that's where everybody is wrong about that. It has no force and effect because it's entirely inconsistent with the bylaws definition of conflict of interest, which is the only thing that controls whether there is a conflict of interest, Gio. But again, we've been through those of us who were here a year ago spent hours upon hours. And if we have to review it again, that's fine. But I will not allow us as a group not to hear the perspective that unless there is something that attaches to the definition in the bylaws as a conflict of interest, it has no business being in whatever we call this thing, the conflict of interest policy.
Yeah.
Policy must be consistent with the bylaws. This isn't.
Well, hopefully, Joel, this will be a collaborative process where people can exchange ideas and opinions. Everyone's voice will be heard. and we can reach a decision based on consensus, and no one will go into a conversation with non-negotiables. That said, we're gonna move off this
Wait a
agenda
minute. No,
item.
you-
We're done, we're
Tracy,
done,
you
we're
can't do
done,
it.
Joel.
You
We're
can't-
done this agenda item.
But we're not done with my pointing out innuendo.
We're done with this agenda item. I'd ask.
No
you to
more
reserve your
innuendo, and
comment.
I'll be happy to go along.
Joel,
No,
please reserve your comment for a future time when it is on the agenda for further discussion. You will
Innuendo is
have the
not-
opportunity.
Innuendo is always on the agenda. Okay, well, but on this particular issue, we should move on. I didn't expect that we'd be talking about it even this much.
I would like to move on to approval of the minutes of November 16th. I would entertain a motion in a second, and then we can discuss any amendments to the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Gio. Is there a second?
Second.
Zach has seconded it. Approval of the minutes. Is there any discussion? Bob-
Tracy, do you
Bobby
want to,
Joe?
do you want to raise what we talked about?
I was wondering if Bobby Joe might want to do that.
Okay, very simple.
Yep, there's a note. I'll just skip down to it very quickly. In C3 that refers to a VISBIT staff member. And we're going to remove VISBIT staff from that comment in the minutes, if that's okay with everyone.
So it will read, Tracy provided a high-level review of the agenda protocol, including the request for agenda items 2 weeks in advance of the meeting and a final agenda being sent out 1 week in advance of the meeting. Simple change. Zach, you have a question?
Is this changed to reflect something more accurately, reflect what was said? Or was there, I guess I'm unclear about the purpose of the change.
Want to try?
Yes.
Okay. In essence, Zach, I pointed this out. I made a sort of a mistake in my own interpretation, but in point of fact, the protocol doesn't refer to VISBIT staff. It happens to be sort of the informal protocol adjacent, attendant to the formal protocol. And it just, rather than get into any discussion about whether Bobby Joe in this context is a VEHI staff member or not, we thought the simplest way to address it would be just to eliminate from VISBIT staff so that we just can move on. It's certainly accurate without from VISBIT staff.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussions about approval with that small adjustment? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions. Thank you. The next item of business is management updates. I'm going to turn it over to Bobby Joe, I think, to facilitate the updates. Or is it Jonathan? Who's in charge?
Might be Mark.
Yes.
So Mark is going to take this first topic of the Visitors RFP status. And John and I will also jump in, but he is going to kick it off for us.
Okay, thank you.
All right, when we built the agenda, Bobby Joe, John and I had assumed this was going to be a pretty quick conversation.
Uh-oh.
How's that for a lead in? Spoiler alert. And things have recently taken a turn we didn't quite expect. And so this is likely to be a longer and more complicated and perhaps convoluted conversation as a result. So please bear with us, and by all means, stop us, ask questions at any point in time. This is sort of a multi-staged presentation. So what we'd like to do is to sort of level set And you'll recall, all except Geo, of course, that on November 8th, Visters, the Vermont State Teachers Retirement System, put out an RFP, request for proposal, for its retirement system health benefit program for both the under 65 retirees, people not eligible for Medicare yet, and its Medicare beneficiaries. Now, if you've ever been through an RFP process with Visters, and you should be very grateful if you've never had the pleasure. It is, and the reason I say that is it's a very long, involved, complicated process. And the last time we went through it was 2017. So this round, we secured authorization from our board of directors, you all, again, except for Geo, to submit 2 bids for this RFP. And this is the first time we've ever done this. The first bid was for what we called the status quo. That is, the VEHI bid to continue to serve both populations of retirees, under 65 and Medicare beneficiaries. The second bid is what we call the joint proposal with an entity shortly titled VBA, Vermont Blue Advantage. It's a fully owned subsidiary of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont, and it exists solely for the purpose of marketing and managing Medicare Advantage plans, MA plans for short, both here in Vermont and actually I think exclusively in Vermont. In this RFP process, VEHI, in addition to its status quo bid, partnered with VBA to offer a joint proposal whereby VEHI would continue to serve the under 65 retirees, and Visters would partner with VBA for the Medicare beneficiaries, and VEHI and VBA would integrate their services where appropriate to serve Visters as a whole and their retirees. And to that end, we wrote, our lawyers refined, and VBA signed a memorandum of understanding that committed us to file jointly for this RFP. And if awarded the RFP, we would observe a delineation of work duties as spelled out in the MOU. The MOU is not legally binding. If we are awarded the joint proposal, and Visters has not yet made a decision, then we would need to codify the terms in the MOU that are relevant to division of labor in a contract form. But the MOU lays the foundation for that, and it also allowed us to streamline this very complicated RFP joint proposal. So December 8th, and you can see the work that went into this laid out in my quarterly report. Bobby Joe and I finalized the last minute preparations for the submission of the RFP. I drove it over to the pavilion in Montpelier, gladly handed it off to a security guard, and felt that I got 5 years back on my life at the same moment. And on January 15th, or shortly before, Bobby Joe and John and I were notified that Visters was having finalist presentations. And we were invited along with Blue Cross and VBA to present on the status quo proposal and the joint proposal. And Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont also bid independently, right? So there's basically, what I say, 3 proposals that have VEHI, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and VBA somehow in the mix, right? The VEHI status quo, Blue Cross's independent proposal, and then the VEHI VBA joint proposal. And we covered the first 2 of those, excuse me, the first and third of those, status quo, joint proposal at the finalist presentation. When the VEHI team got off the call, Blue Cross then answered questions on its independent bid. The finalist presentation went extremely well. We all felt good about it. We prepped very hard for it. Blue Cross felt very good about it as well. There was an exchange of congratulatory emails. And we assumed that we were the only real finalists in the game at that point in time. On January 19th, we received an email from Steve May of Hickok and Boardman. Hickok and Boardman is the consulting firm that advises and guides Visters in healthcare matters. And they are navigating Visters and everyone else through this RFP process. And they sent us an email with two parts. The body of the email basically asked us and VBA to refine our final offers. Essentially, we'd like you to review one more time with us these particular issues and see if there's any more advantage or benefits that you can bring to us. So that was pretty straightforward. Again, a little more work, something we'd have to do with Blue Cross as well, but not terribly surprising. But then there was an attachment with 17 additional questions that we had not yet seen. And among those questions are 4 that point clearly to the fact that Visters is now entertaining a bid from another entity for its Medicare Advantage retirees, 65 and older crowd. We know that Humana and Aetna bid on the Medicare Advantage population from the November 8th to December 8th period. So in addition to us and VBA, Humana and Aetna were also in the mix. We have no insight into what it is they bid. But it's clear from 4 questions, which we'll put up on the screen shortly, that they must have bid in a fashion that is attractive enough to Visters, either in terms of cost savings, rate guarantee duration, or both, for them to give serious consideration to this bid. And these 4 questions out of the 17 are essentially asking VEHI, are you amenable to working with a new provider, a new competitor, unnamed, if Visters elects to award the Medicare Advantage contract to someone other than Vermont Blue Advantage? And we didn't see that coming, obviously. But on January 19th, it is suddenly sort of in the mix. Bobby Joe, is there a way for you to make this a little larger screen?
Too big.
Okay. So Bobby Joe, okay, so I think I can see this. So you'll see question 2, would VEHI extend the same administrative fee arrangement if Vermont Blue Advantage were not the chosen option?
So Mark, can I just talk about the admin fee for a moment so people understand?
Yeah, of course, go ahead, please.
So the admin fee is, the portion that Visters pays for their over 65s to cover our administrative costs, our wellness program, which is really a big benefit for their retirees and the retiree spouses as well. And it also covers a serious subsidization issue that we have going on between the under 65s and the over 65s. So the PM, the per member per month, is about $33.54 in order to cover those expenses. So our administrative costs, the wellness program, and the subsidization issue. The subsidization issue is $25 per member per month just alone. So that's kind of that's what the administrative fee is that they're referring to here.
Bobby Joe, thank you for that context.
When you say member, are you member or subscriber?
Member.
Okay, school district.
No, oh, sorry, no. When we say, when I refer to a member, I'm referring to dependents as well. So every subscriber plus their dependents.
Oh, so we're talking 40,000 times the fee, the per month fee.
Well, in this instance, I think it's about 7,200.
Except we're only talking about retirees. My mistake. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bobby Joe, thank you.
Sure.
Bobby Joe, would you scroll down to, I think it's question 8 next?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I don't know what's the matter with it. It doesn't want to go. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thanks. Question 8, if a competitor is chosen for the over 65 population, how do you think this changes the member service dynamic? What level of coordination between the new provider, BCBS of Vermont, do you anticipate? Question 9, we anticipate that the current parameters for VEHI are to work with BCBS of VT. If there was a change to an alternate provider, what would the process and steps necessary to continue with VEHI as a service provider to oversee the new relationship? And finally, the fourth question that sort of points in the direction of Vista's thinking on this. Question 10, is VEHI willing to take the steps to create a relationship with an alternate provider if the result of this process is to change providers for Medicare? Now, the other questions on this document, the other 13, they're not unimportant. They're just not specific to this question of working with an alternate provider, which is why we're not going to spend a lot of time on them tonight. Happy though to entertain any questions about. So in talking through this as a management team, we were unable to come to an agreement about how to respond to these 7 questions, specifically, more importantly, to these 4 questions. And what we'd like to do tonight as a management team is to express the disparate opinions that we have. John and Bobby Joe have one, I have another. I'll ask my colleagues to begin with their position. I'll follow up with mine, and then we can open this up to a conversation with you. Joel?
We can't hear you, Joel.
Joel?
I'm sorry. Is there a due date?
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah, we actually have to make a decision tonight.
Oh, great.
Yeah, you're right. And that's not because of the management team, but because Vistas is asking for a response, I think no later than 3 o'clock tomorrow, January 26th. And we got this again on January 19th, a week ago. So we are unfortunately under a lot of pressure tonight to make a decision. Thank you, Joe.
Oh, I'm sorry I asked.
Yeah, I have to say that as a management update item, given the significance of this question in and of itself, I want to put out there that I'm concerned about making a decision tonight when it wasn't on the agenda as such. Nonetheless, let's have the discussion and hear the pros and cons so that we can guide a respectful response to our good partners at Vistas.
So John, do you want me to start and then you can clean up anything I missed?
That sounds like fun. I've got my notes, but you go right ahead, Bobby Joe.
Sounds good. So Mark's right. We didn't expect these questions. They kind of came to us and we were like, oh, this is not what we thought was going to happen at all. So, you know, a number of months ago, we knew Vistas was starting to have this conversation with Blue Cross about Medicare Advantage. We've been having conversations with BBA and Blue Cross for months now. It took about 6 weeks to put together an MOU to work with BBA. And while we do have a good one kind of started, it does take time for these agreements to go back and forth. John and I feel like at this late in the game, actually even before we knew this portion of it, we were concerned about a July 1st implementation date because it's really hard to implement a new plan in just 5 months. But we felt like, you know, we know Blue Cross knows the benefits. They're duplicating the benefits that they offer today. And they also have the membership file so they can take it from Blue Cross of Vermont and move it to VBA. They've got, you know, a whole timeline planned out. So after talking with them a couple of times, we feel like, okay, Blue Cross can make this happen and we'll be comfortable with it. We were nervous about a 7/1 date regardless, but we felt like, okay, I think with Blue Cross, we can get this done. And then kind of throwing in at this point, a new vendor who they haven't even named to try to come into this at this point to make this happen. While it's a non-binding agreement that we have with them, you know, there is a spirit of this MOU that we went into this together with our longtime partner. So I just, I'm very hesitant with the timeline and then hesitant to kind of, I feel like we would be backing out of the MOU that we had in place with BBA. So John, was there other things?
Sure. And I would add, I think, you know, back, if you look at the minutes, when we talked about this, we had this third option. We talked about it as a management team, which was, should we also put in a bid just for the under 65s? And we decided, no, we would put in a status quo bid. And we worked hard to come up with an MOU to put in a bid with VBA Blue Cross. And that's what we decided to do. We think the timeline is very compressed. Everything would have to go perfectly for whether it's Aetna or Humana. That's who we think it is. We don't even know. We have no relationship with them. And I'm afraid that, you know, I was hired and you pay me to help run this organization to make sure that financially we're in good shape and our reputation is strong. And so I'm afraid that there could be a lot of pitfalls if everything doesn't go absolutely perfectly to hit July 1, and we're going to take the blame and the brunt of the criticism for that. I think Visitors is trying to chase any dollar they can. They want to split the baby here. That's not the bid we put in. We put in a bid with an MOU to go with VBA, and I think that's what we should stick with.
And we haven't talked about dollars yet, but there is a $12 million savings on the table from what our joint bid, or excuse me, what our status quo bid is today and what the Medicare Advantage plan has to offer. We don't know what the other bid is, but they do have $12 million on the table just to move to VBA. There is, because of this administrative cost and the subsidization issue, that does wipe out about 3 million of that savings, but still it's a $9 million savings for them to stick with our joint bid together.
Mark?
First thing I want to say is that I want to be really clear about what it is Visitors is actually asking for from us, in case my initial explanation may not have been clear enough. And also to build off of a couple of things that John and Bobby Joe just said. Visitors is looking for information from us. They've given us questions they'd like answers to. They're not looking for another joint bid between us and an unknown carrier. Yes, there are $9 million in savings potentially on the table from the VBA bid. I think the reason these questions are before us is because whoever this new competitor is or provider, it has offered Visitors something it can't walk away from, which suggests to me that it is potentially more money in savings and or a longer period of a rate guarantee. And at a time when the retirement system is under enormous financial pressure, both here and everywhere else in the country, for the state treasurer to be able to show savings in excess of $12 million, if that is indeed what's driving these questions, is, I think, terribly important. And I think that VEHI owes the state treasurer, and Visitors is our largest member group with nearly 7,000 enrollees, that we owe the treasurer and her team a good faith effort to answer the questions that they have put to us, to assess honestly and thoroughly our ability to assist in this transition with a new provider who would offer the MA plans, and we would continue to serve the under 65s. So what I'd like to do tonight is to offer a proposal that I think threads that needle. It respects, as Tracy just alluded to, a 20-year relationship with our largest member group and the state treasurer. It respects the long-term relationship with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont, which is very important to us and to you, obviously. And it gives us the opportunity in the future to continue to serve retirees, in this case, the under 65 population, which is what we bid for with VBA, a population of retirees who knows us well, who trust us, and who can depend on us. So that's the needle I'm going to try to thread with this particular proposal. I'm going to have to ask Bobby Joe. You already did. Thank you, Bobby Joe. I don't know how readable this is on your screen, so I'm going to be reading off of a page. Can folks actually see this?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks. I can't because of the nature of my computer, so I'll work off of paper, and Bobby Joe can sort of navigate the screen. So I propose we actually answer the questions that were asked, that we not say we are not willing to do this because we are wedded exclusively to the joint proposal with VBA. The MOU that we drafted was designed to facilitate that joint bid, and if we were awarded it, to define the division of labor. But if Visitors decides it doesn't want VBA for its Medicare Advantage population, then what potentially can VEHI bring to help in that transition, and again, to continue to serve the under 65 retirees? So what I propose is that we actually answer those 4 questions, as well as the others, honestly and thoroughly, completely, but that we actually begin with what they didn't ask for. And that's a very detailed preface. that would make the following points and reiterate these points in the body of the questions themselves, where appropriate. So for example, we say up front that we submitted a joint bid with Vermont Blue Advantage because that's the partner we want to work with. That's the partner we want to continue with down the road. We've got a long history of collaboration. We did a lot of work leading up to the bid to ensure that the bid was both competitive and could be implemented in a reasonable timeline. John and Bobby Joe are right. July 1 is a tight turnaround, but it's going to be a tight turnaround no matter who does it. Right? And Humana and Aetna are in the top 3 providers of Medicare Advantage in the country. So they do this a lot. So our preface would spell out that our preference is to continue with our joint bid and to continue with the collaboration with Blue Cross. However, if Visitors is seriously exploring another vendor other than VBA, we will be amenable to talking about how we can serve the under 65 retirees with a new vendor, consistent with how we answered the questions and with the following terms. Number 1, VEHI would need to be assured that a mutually satisfactory memorandum of understanding can be negotiated with the new vendor, just like we did with VBA, delineating all the work obligations. This is something we had to do before the other bid. This is something we'd want to be able to be assured we could do with the new provider. And that MOU that we did with VBA that we spent so much time on, Bobby Joe noted, that's our template. That's our foundation for entering into a conversation or a negotiation with a new provider. And that MOU, just like the one with VBA, as I said, would address the major divisions of labor. And let's be clear about what we're really talking about here. If we had the under 65s, and let's say it's Humana we're talking about to keep it simple, and Humana had the Medicare Advantage plans, where do we intersect? Well, we don't intersect with claims processing. Those are 2 separate tracks. And we don't intersect with rate setting. As Bobby Joe noted, the subsidization dynamic comes into play eventually. But that's us negotiating with Visitors the way we always do. And then Visitors having to figure out how much of that dynamic it wants to subsidize and how much of the savings from Medicare Advantage it wants to direct toward the under 65s to cover that subsidization. So in a lot of key areas, there is no intersection or fundamental intersection, but here's where there is some. At some point in time, not immediately, we'd have to have a new benefit booklet. And the part for the Medicare retirees would have to have new provisions for Medicare Advantage. So we'd have to add that language to the Medicare, to our VEHI booklet. And that material would have to be produced largely by the new MA provider, whether it was VBA or Humana. More importantly, because again, that's not an urgent matter, we need Medicare Advantage educational materials that the current Medicare beneficiaries and Visitors can use to understand what Medicare Advantage is, how it's different or the same from what they have today. And what Visitors is doing is duplicating the benefits they have today with Medicare Advantage, plus considering some additional benefits like dental and vision and an additional wellness rider. Those materials really are important, but again, they're largely going to be developed by the Medicare Advantage provider with our input, because we know these people. We know how to communicate with them. We know what their questions are likely to be, what their anxieties are likely to be. Then we'd also have to develop a communication timeline with the Medicare Advantage provider and service protocols, because we know there's going to be an avalanche of questions from the Medicare retirees and from the under 65s, because everything seems to be in flux right now with COVID. There's a big debate around pensions. People are going to assume that this change with the Medicare Advantage provider is another major change. And even though the benefits are going to stay the same, the questions are still going to come. So we need to work out how that service is going to be provided so those questions get answered. And VBA had said they're going to set up a kind of a transition hotline, right? A service center where all the calls can be directed from those retirees, or most of them, to that service center. And so we'd want to know from this new provider, assuming that provider's chosen, can you replicate that? Can you set up a service center? Then there's also the question of premium payments and how they flow. Right now, they go from Visters to us. For the Medicare Advantage population, they can continue to come to us, and then from us to the new Medicare Advantage provider, or they can go right from Visters to the Medicare Advantage provider. That's something we'd have to work out with VBA or a new provider. And then we'd have to resolve the question of the status of our wellness program. Does the new provider want to continue to offer it to Medicare Advantage beneficiaries? And if so, what would the cost of that be? Those are all things we were going to have to do with VBA. So my suggestion is that we spell that out for Visters. And we let them know that those are issues we need resolved, that we need to have a really clear sense of in conversations with them and with this new provider. And that this MOU, if there's an MOU to be had with a new provider, that we have that finalized by Wednesday, February 10th. And remember, we've got a template of an MOU. We've done a lot of the hard work at our end. So it's a question of us communicating with the Medicare Advantage provider, who we don't know yet, again, let's say Humana, what it is that's important to us, what it is we've already worked on. And we try to get that new MOU in place by February 10th. And if Vista says, well, you can take a little bit more time because we're not going to announce this change for later, we can take that time. But I think we're really well positioned to answer these questions. Again, I think we owe it to Vistas after 20 years to do this. And I also think the reason these questions are coming to us now is not only because this new provider has made a very attractive proposal, but I think Vistas probably said to this new provider, and again, this is speculation, we have a long-term relationship with VEHI. Here's the kind of services we've depended on them from. Are you willing to talk to them? Are you willing to engage them on this? I'm fairly confident that this new provider understands that we're in the mix, at least for purposes of discussion. And we also know that Blue Cross received questions, some of them similar to these, some of them different. So Vistas is now trying to ascertain with this new unexpected dynamic from Humana or Aetna, who can best serve the under 65 population. It's either going to be us or it's going to be Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont. And I think we should make a very comprehensive, fair proposal to them about what we can do within the guidelines that I laid out here.
So I just want to,
Bobby Joe?
I just add one thing that, part of the reason that we went into this with VBA and only did the two options was because of the administrative fee, which has already been approved and baked into our 2022 rates. And so removing any of those services at this point would be detrimental to a lot of our programs, especially our wellness program.
Even more
Bobby
reason
Joe,
to fight for it.
Bobby Joe, could you go away from showing, go to full screen so I can see everybody?
Yep.
And I would like to invite board members to comment or ask questions. I will give everybody one bite at the apple before a second bite of the apple. I can see Joel has his hand up physically, so you're welcome to raise your hand.
Typically, I don't bother raising my hand.
Thank you. Raise your hand physically so I can see it, or in the participants. And Joel, I'll let you go first, and we will rotate around.
I gotta say,
on everybody's thoughts.
okay, this is sort of stunning that we're under such a gun here. For me, obviously there's money involved, but we have some very important relationships involved here. We've talked about them. They're in our mission statement, for God's sake. We are inextricably entwined with the operations of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont, similarly with the Vermont State Teachers Retirement System. You guys, none of us, wanted to do this, wanted to engage in this. But the state being the state and the treasurer's office being the treasurer's office, are looking for money wherever they can find it. So it's sort of the backdrop for me is, how do we navigate here in a way that protects the people we represent and maintains as much as possible the relationships that are in place that enable us to do that work. So so I guess the initial question for me, since I see a proposal from Mark, is Bobby or John. Bobby Joe or John. I didn't hear. Maybe I just didn't hear it. What is it you're proposing that we do in reaction to these questions? I didn't hear anything.
Bobby Joe's put together some responses, but going with what we voted on at the last meeting, which is we are partnering with VBA. That's our proposal. It saves you $12 million. And we're not willing to break that apart and go with some unknown entity.
So that leads to, I should have said part A and part B. The obvious part B is, well, what happens to our the well-being of 7,000 of our subscribers if we do that and Visitors, as we call it, goes with Humana or Aetna? What happens?
They still have to cover the under 65 somehow. I'm
Well,
not
that's
sure.
my question, John. That's our responsibility, as far as I'm concerned, to make sure that there is a way to serve them without simply saying they have to be served by someone somehow.
Well, if you
There's
take the
gotta
status
be-
quo that they have
Wait,
now.
Joel, your time
So
is
that-
up.
So that's,
Sorry.
but that's the question that I see that isn't
Yeah.
answered yet.
If you would do me the favor of directing your questions to me and then I'll pass them off. I want to make sure we keep our conversations respectful. Peggy, you are next in line, then Geo, then Zach, then Lisa.
Where are you?
Thanks. It's definitely a lot going on here, but as all three were speaking, that what came to mind is, and I think Joel was getting at this, but why wouldn't we answer the questions? I think in Mark's proposal, you're answering the questions and at the same time highlighting this collaborative venture with VBA. So, from my mind, if a valued partner that we did decide to make 2 bids on, John, you're correct with that, has asked questions, I would hope that VEHI would be able to respond to that. And the response might be, I don't know, the response could certainly be what Mark has pitched. I'm not quite where Bobby, Joe, and John are from the last meeting, I guess, about just saying no. Because I'm also really struck by the fact that we just discussed our mission statement. And although Visitors is noted in there, Blue Cross Blue Shield is not. I understand we have a long-standing relationship with them. I understand it's an important one. But I think we do have that kind of a relationship with Visitors as well.
Geo?
Gio, you are muted.
I was led to believe that we weren't making any significant decisions in this meeting.
You're right about that. We haven't.
There you go, Joel. That's the key. I'm so new at all this. The depth of my knowledge is not very deep here, but just as a business person, running a farm, my gut impression says this is too much. Switching horses in midstream here is a dangerous proposal. So I'm listening. I'm listening and learning here, but that's my initial reaction. So.
Thank you, Geo. Zach?
No, I don't. Well, first, I don't like the timeline situation at all. Is making me really uncomfortable around the speed at which a decision would need to be made. It's and then to have the fact that when people say, well, we didn't really anticipate this, is because this is sort of a change in the rules of the game. When we had time and we had the rules of the game, we came to certain conclusions about what we were going to do. And now to be fishing for whether or not we could on that side, there could be some changes in the rules of the game at this late juncture makes me uncomfortable. So, and I do understand trying to balance the two existing relationships. I think are both important. But in this case, of the two different existing relationships, the one who is trying to change the rules late is Vistas and not Blue Cross. So I'm trying to keep that in mind too, in terms of balancing those two relationships. Which one of those two relationships is asking more of us at a particular moment? And right now it's Vistas who's pushing harder on asking for more from that relationship.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hopefully my internet will hold up.
I saw you coming and going.
I don't know. I guess I'm feeling very, I'm a little confused. I'm trying to keep track of what's going on here, but I guess the part that leaves me a little confused is the fact that we're basically possibly talking about disregarding a fairly sizable chunk of our membership in terms of the under 65. And it's almost as if you're saying, okay, well, they're a problem and therefore, they've been subsidized. And, but I don't see a solution. I see just they're being identified as the problem, but I haven't, other than answering the questions and addressing it, I'm left kind of wondering. I guess that's not very eloquent, but that's where I'm at.
I'll take a shot at sharing my thoughts if that's all right.
Please.
In my experience, it's taken us 1 to 2 years to develop new plans and roll out new plans. I am extremely concerned about a rollout timeline that would be 4 months or less for any option we chose, right? So if we develop an MOU and it's in by February, and they say, oh, this new partnership doesn't work because of all those variables we need to work out, we're then even farther behind the 8 ball in the plans that we have already submitted an RFP for. I cannot, based on the vision, the mission, and my experience with our history of service, it's imperative to me that we offer high quality service that has as few glitches as possible. And in my experience, even when the glitches are not our own, we take responsibility for them, and politically and practically. So I know that this will be 100% our work because we are the ones with the relationship with the employees, with the retirees, with Vistas, and with the service agencies. I also know that we considered this very option and rejected it not too long ago because of the same issues that we're grappling with now. That said, I agree that we want to do our part to contribute something of value to the public education, which includes our retirees, who are important to us pre-Medicaid and Medicaid Advantage. I just think that we cannot undertake a partnership with a new vendor in 3 months or less, and agree that we should answer the questions and believe that we should be open to exploring partnerships with other vendors in the future, perhaps as part of our response to the questions, but it's simply not responsible to try and, I understand in the heart and wanting to do more, but I just don't see how we could possibly pull it off and make sure that people are cared for without glitches by July 1. I'll give the 3 trust administrators one more bite at the apple, and then we'll decide what we're going to do about it. Mark, you can go first.
Sure. There are very clear lines of division with a Medicare Advantage provider and someone like ourselves who doesn't offer Medicare Advantage. The lion's share of the work for the Medicare Advantage population will not and cannot be done with us, or by us, I should say, because of CMS rules. For example, there can be no commingling of funds. Handling of questions and needs specific to that population has to be done largely by the Medicare Advantage population. So 100% of the work can't be done by us because it's prohibited by CMS. And that's, I think, just important to keep in mind. And the areas where there would be an integration or an intersection between us and a new provider, assuming that the new provider is chosen, we don't know that it will be. We're just simply answering the questions. The lines of intersection are largely administrative. And they're projects that I'm very confident we can do with a new provider as much as with VBA. And the MOU foundation we've already built, I think will streamline the negotiations with any new provider, because in fact, there is virtually no money exchanging hands. There is no money exchanging hands between the two entities. So I think we can do this.
Mark and Bobby Joe and Jonathan, would one of you like to speak?
So I want to be clear on a couple of things. First of all, this is not about Blue Cross and our relationship with Blue Cross. This is about our members and making sure that they're taken care of and that they have ID cards on July 1st when this is implemented. And if something gets, their ID card isn't there or their membership isn't correct, that who are they going to call and get that straightened out? We just went through a lot in 2018 and it wasn't our fault. Yet I reconciled over 300 accounts last summer. I'm not saying that we don't answer the questions. I'm saying that we answer the questions as you asked us what we could do. We gave you our 2 bids. Here is our suggestions. Would we be interested in potentially working with another carrier at another time? Sure. If you give us a little lead time, maybe give us a name. We don't even know who it is. So we can't just pick a new provider and say we're going to endorse this new provider that we don't even know who it is. I think that's really irresponsible. And again, I think that we could look at another vendor, but I think we need time and we would need that runway to build a relationship, make sure that we want to put VEHI's name on that before we do it. So again, I'm not suggesting we don't answer questions. I just don't think we answer them the same way that Mark is thinking of answering them.
Jonathan?
Thank you. And just to piggyback on what Bobby Joe said, Visters is an important member group of VEHI, but they're asking an awful lot of us in a short time period, and there's so many unknowns. As Bobby Joe said, we don't even know who it is. We don't know if they want our wellness program. We don't know if they're willing to work with us. If we have a problem, right now I can call somebody at Blue Cross and get an answer. We don't know anything about what they're proposing. It's not fair to VEHI, and it's not fair to our members who really need and count on this. People come to us at the most difficult times of their lives. Health coverage. We can't let them down.
So this item was not on the agenda for action or even, it was just on the agenda for an update. And this is a very significant conversation. I'm going to look back to the 3 trust administrators and ask if this discussion gives you enough information to respond consistent with our earlier decisions without action. And to anyone on the board as well, or do you feel there is a need for action?
I think there's a need for action. The management team is not going to be able to resolve its differences on its own with this.
Very well. Joel, is there something you'd like to add?
Well, yeah, I guess I was going to start with the same observation. I don't think the 3 of them would have brought it to our attention if they had been able to resolve it themselves without us. And I don't think as high quality as the questions and comments have been, I don't think they're even close to sufficient in enabling us to resolve this in an either or manner. I'm listening to this and what I'm hearing more than anything else, at least in Bobby, Joe's, and John's most recent comments, is that the biggest issue is the time frame and not the relationship. Although I understand the relationship is there, and I don't disagree that it seems crazy to truncate the development of programs like this, as complex as we know they can be. And I'm not anxious in seeing VEHI take the fall for somebody else's decision. We've seen what happens there. But it seems to me from the little I know here that the retirement system is hell bent on making a decision soon, and in anticipation of implementing it, I guess, on July 1st, 2021. That's fiscal 22. Is that right? And if
July 1, yeah, July 1 of this year.
okay, so if that's right, our anxiety notwithstanding, it seems to me that in the name of not writing off 7,000 people to being insured by a health provider not even in state, that we need to find a way of responding to the questions, expressing our strong opinion about both the time frame and the significance of our partnership with the Blues, but at the same time acknowledge that there is an ongoing role for us if the time frame is somehow made doable for us. It seems to me responding that way would at least induce them to pay more attention to us than if we respond simply by saying we are going to stand pat on the proposal that we've provided you, because that's not what they asked us to do. So you follow what I'm saying? There's got to be a way. I don't see the differences in this discussion as all that terribly significant.
So
Mark seems to be saying we got to find a way. I don't want to characterize Mark or Bobby Joe or John any more than I did, but it just seems to me that unfortunately it's going to take time to figure out how to word this. But we've got to respond to the questions in such a way that leaves us having a role with respect to retired teachers.
So here's my take. One is, I didn't hear anybody say we want to abandon.
No, but nobody said.
Please don't interrupt me. Nobody said we don't care and we want to abandon people to an external care, an external healthcare organization. In fact, please stop interrupting.
I didn't say that. I don't want you to mischaracterize what I say, as you usually do.
Please stop interrupting.
Okay. If you don't mischaracterize me,
in fact, what we are saying is we care about people and want to deliver a service that we are confident that we can deliver with quality.
Agreed.
In terms of a relationship with Visters, I would prefer not to have a motion on the books that could be misinterpreted. I suspect I know how a vote is going to go. I could be wrong. And I would prefer to defer to our administrative team to craft communications consistent with the discussion that we have. We care about you. We want to provide you a quality product. We're willing to explore other vendors in a time frame where we can deliver with a level of quality that we feel is important for the well-being of all of our insured individuals. If it's necessary to have a formal vote of the board, which I feel I'm comfortable with in terms of relationship, but also in terms of the process of this not being on the agenda, I'm happy to call the question. So I'm looking to board members. I guess if someone wants to make a motion, I'll receive that. If not, we'll move on.
I'm really confused. We know that there are two.
Do you want to make a motion or shall we move on?
I'm in the middle of a sentence and I think you just interrupted me. So I'm not quite sure what to do.
Well, I'm asking if we're going to have a motion on this matter or if we want to move on to a new subject.
That's a question with no relevance to this discussion, Tracy. I can't answer that one.
Okay.
I'll pretend.
Then we'll move on to the next agenda item.
I'll pretend.
And we'll leave it where we are.
Tracy, we can't do that.
Do that and
yes, we can.
No, we can't because we got to respond to.
We took action. You have direction.
No, I'm sorry.
I'm confident in your ability to communicate our interests.
Tracy,
I'm confident. I understand you don't agree, but I'm confident that you can do that.
Tracy, I appreciate the confidence, but we are divided. A house divided can't stand, right?
The
We
board
can't-
direction stands. So we're gonna move on.
No,
to the
we
next
don't
agenda
have direction
item.
on the 17 new questions. So
I
maybe we do need a motion.
I
So
can't,
the next item is the
Tracy, excuse me,
cooperative
point of order.
study.
We have not taken a vote on whether to continue this discussion or to terminate it. It's not your decision.
It is my decision.
It's not-
It's a management update item. I'm ready to move on.
You're about to be deprived of a quorum
Okay, we can.
if you want to do that.
we
But I
can
will tell
finish
you,
this
I will
meeting.
tell you, Bobby, Joe, and John and Mark, I understand the difficulty here. There are positions.
Joel, I would really ask that you stick with the agenda. If I gave an opportunity for a question or a motion, it wasn't taken, I'd like to move on. We had a 70-minute agenda and we're over that time. We have a limited time to finish our business.
I need other people to stand up and say that's ridiculous. And you have to do that.
Tracy, tomorrow morning,
That's
there's a 9 o'clock management team meeting.
I
And we're not
understand.
going to be able to agree on how to answer the questions.
You
So what
have
we're-
board direction, answer
No,
consistent with our
no.
past action.
No, Tracy, no, Tracy, I'm sorry. There's something different on the table now. It's
No,
not the way it was
no.
before. We've got to answer
Okay.
these questions.
You can say that we didn't have adequate opportunity to review it with the board then.
So then we cannot answer the questions, is what you're suggesting.
No, I'm not saying that. I
Well, what
think
are you
we should
suggesting
stop
then?
playing games. Let's
No, I'm
move on.
not.
Let's
No.
move on to
Hey.
the next agenda item, please. I'd like the cooperative study update.
We're not playing this way.
Okay.
So
Tracy, I'm truly baffled. I don't know what to do tomorrow. I'm trying to, I don't know if John and Bobby Joe do either. If we don't
Mark,
have.
I have answers to the questions based on the
Well, we
decision
don't
that was
agree on
made.
those answers. We don't agree on those answers.
what kind of bullying is this,
I mean,
folks?
we don't agree.
I'm astounded at
Let's end
quick-
the meeting.
how quickly
There's not
we
bullying
evolved.
happening. There's disagreement. And when disagreement happens, sometimes you have to compromise. We have given board direction.
No,
Tracy.
what is
Oh,
the
you can-
direction?
Tracy, there has not been any discussion about the compromise.
I'm going
And
to
that's what I was
adjourn the
trying to get.
meeting and we can reconvene
I-
at another time
I-
then.
I have a question, but I guess
Please.
it deals with how any organization would work if you have we have three administrators here, and two of them think one way, one of them thinks another way. Doesn't that decide the question?
No, it's not how
No,
we
it's
work.
not, it's not a majority.
Never worked that way.
It's
It
a
doesn't-
consensus issue.
Hang
however-
on, just
Gio,
hey, just let one person answer the question. Mark, go
No,
ahead and answer
I'll
it.
answer it as the
Gio, we
senior
don't work
member.
that way.
I'll answer it as the senior
no,
member of
Joel,
this
please,
board.
please,
There has never
Joel,
been a decision
please,
other than by
please
consensus
wait
of the matter.
until you're called on, if you're called on.
Well, you.
May I answer the
you
question,
shut me
Tracy?
down
I'd love
if
to hear Mark's answer to the question.
Thanks, Gio.
Gio, we've never worked that way as a management team. We don't vote. We always try to strive for consensus, and on the rare occasions when we can't reach it, which is one of them tonight, we bring the matter to the board. So I would really benefit, we all would, from further discussion. I beg you, further discussion of this and a motion from someone to try to see if there's a middle ground here we can all stand on. Because we cannot go back as a management team divided on how to answer those 4 critical questions. The other 13 we can answer. Those 4 we need guidance on.
And my point is you have board direction previously. We already decided that
No.
we could not do this within the time frame. We considered it and rejected it in
No.
December when we approved the MOU.
No,
And
I'm
you
sorry. That's
also got unanimity across the trust administrators that we'd be willing to work on future possibilities in a timeline.
I'm sorry, that's not a board,
Future
it's not a board decision. That's you summarizing what you heard tonight. It's not a board decision.
No, it was a board decision we made in December.
No, we agreed to have a joint
Mark,
proposal
I'm
with
not going to
EBA.
debate with you.
All right, debate with me then.
Things
I'm
have
not
changed.
debating with you. I'm gonna
Things- but
end
things
the
have
meeting and we're
changed.
gonna move on.
Things have changed, Tracy.
I'm
I want
going-
to respond to a couple of things.
I'm not calling on you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
I'm going to
the matter?
respond to them anyway.
No,
You can't do this, Tracy. You cannot
I'm-
bully your way through this decision the way you did paragraph 8 in the conflict of interest policy. You can't do this. If you want to do it, fine, try. But I'm telling you, Bobby Joe and John, you know, watching this, that more has to be discussed. You cannot rely on the assertion that somehow something was decided at a prior meeting before this issue was even raised as justification to proceed the way that you want, that you're suggesting. If you do it, there are penalties to be paid in multiple ways in this organization. This is really not what I anticipated.
Tracy, Vistas has presented us with a scenario we've never talked about before.
that's not true.
Brand new
We
scenario. No, it
talked
is.
about it and rejected it in December.
No, we never reject. No, we
I'm
didn't
sorry,
reject
when the
it.
proposal was made, it was explicitly made to exclude a different type of bid. I clearly remember it.
No,
It was
you- what
explicitly
you-
made, and we had great discussion about the effort it would take to
There were
partnership with
we were-
VEHI
we were-
and why other pathways were not
We
being
were
considered.
authorized for a joint proposal and for
That's right.
status quo. You're right.
That's right.
Those are the two things, right? And now Vistas is saying there's a different scenario, and we want you to weigh in on it. It wasn't before us months ago. Now it is.
It
So
was
why don't we try to resolve that?
So I
excluded
just-
and discussed as not included.
I just heard the word status quo. That's what was, I wasn't at the December meeting.
Status
So-
quo, Geo, just means we would serve, VEHI would continue to serve both populations. Then
Right.
there's the joint bid, which is number two.
But what
Number
was,
three
what,
was never on the table.
what was said at the, obviously I wasn't there at the
Sure.
December meeting, was, it sounds like it was kind of agreed upon to work on a status quo basis.
No, what we did, and again, this is hard to follow, we were authorized to give two bids, right? Either Vistas Vista can take our status quo bid where nothing changes, no Medicare Advantage, just us and Blue Cross, or they can have a VBA Medicare Advantage and a VEHI under 65 proposal. And now Vistas is saying, hey, you know what? We're considering something very different. Are you interested in helping us think through it? That's a third option that's now before us. And that's what we're trying to respond to.
I understand that.
That wasn't there in December. And that's what we need help with.
Okay.
That third option wasn't there before.
I would like leave to spend a few minutes drafting a motion. I can't think about how a complex motion like this on the fly. Can
Can we
we either
just-
adjourn, or do you want to move on to some other non-controversial updates?
Yeah, let's take
While I
the
do, but I want,
status update.
I want permission with an understanding that I'm going to come back with a motion.
I'll think about it while you think about your motion.
No, wait a minute, folks. You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that, Tracy.
Tracy, I think
You decided to do
for, I know I'm new to this, but I would encourage you to think that we should hear the motion, just because you did give him the opportunity earlier. So,
I'd rather do it and move on rather than give think time, which is another reason that
You don't
having
wanna-
something on the agenda in advance.
You
is
don't
really
want a motion that's actually thought through? Is that what you're saying?
No, Joel,
Okay, then give me.
I
five-
want
give me
thoughtful
5 minutes.
business
Give me
done in
5
a
minutes.
planful way, which can't be done when we are backed into a corner in a timeline and we don't have business on the agenda in advance.
Give me 5 minutes and I'll be back, all right?
Okay, shall we go on with the updates?
Sure. So the RF cooperative study, this will be shorter. I promise you. Again, Geo, give you a little context. And you may follow our minutes from way back. We set in motion about 2 years ago a study with two large trusts like VEHI in Michigan and Wisconsin, MESA and WEA for short. MESA represents almost 200,000, covers almost 200,000 lives. WEA is about our size, 50,000, then our 43,000, excuse me. And we looked at the possibility of forming an RX pharmacy cooperative between the three entities to see if with 300,000 members, we could leverage greater savings in the marketplace in negotiations with pharmacy benefit managers. See, Zach, I just realized you weren't part of that conversation either. My apologies. So we authorized the study. Long story short, it's taken a while for it to get off the ground. We have our pharmacy analyst, Remedy Analytics, and WEA has Milliman working together, but also independently on this analysis. And we are getting to the point where we're probably going to make a decision sooner than later about whether or not this avenue shows any real promise. At the moment, for reasons we will talk about at a later meeting, we don't think the RX cooperative has savings sufficient enough to justify leaving our present situation and becoming part of this 3-state cooperative. But having said that, it's a complicated story and there's multiple pieces to it. And we'd like to share those with you at a future meeting after we've had an opportunity to finish a final round of meetings with Michigan, Wisconsin, and the 2 analysts, and we can write it up in a way that makes sense to all of you. So that's the update on RX at the moment. More to come.
How about COVID-19?
So we continue to monitor the COVID-19 situation. We just received a recent report of the COVID-19 claims that have come through from Blue Cross. Let's see, so we've had our testing, so just covering the testing for our members, which you'll keep in mind that the teachers have now been offered testing. I think it's every so many weeks, but we haven't really seen much of a dip because that doesn't include their dependents, of course. So we have had, since last February, our members have had 15,412 tests, which costs about $1.6 million. Outpatient testing and related services are 3.5 million. Inpatient, we've only had 12 inpatient, which is less than 400,000, which is good. And then there was 158 outpatient members, less than $100,000. As far as telemedicine, we saw a huge increase in telemedicine use. We have our Amwell provider. Amwell is the provider that has routine care available. But when COVID happened, they loosened up the restrictions to allow for local telemedicine. So now if you call your doctor and you want to get a referral to see a PT, you might just have a virtual visit. So in 2019, we had 700 of those visits costing about $64,000. In 2020, we had 70,000 of those visits. So it went from 700 visits to 70,000, and it went from 64,000 to 6.4 million. So huge change in allowing the local telemedicine to happen for members, which is why, yes, there was a reduction in many claims during March, April, May, and June last year. We still saw a significant increase in telemedicine. So we continue to look through the reports that they send us on a monthly basis. We work with our actuaries to keep an eye on how claims are coming through. Chris watches the reports come through on a monthly basis for financials, but no huge earth-shattering information yet, but it is pretty interesting to watch it come through.
Tracy, may I add one point to Bobby Joe's report?
Sure.
I just want to piggyback off of her telemedicine comment. When you look at national reports on COVID and medical interventions, including telehealth, a common theme across the country is that telehealth has been revolutionized by COVID-19. Everywhere in every context. And I think earlier, I think you invited us to think about changes we might want to see in the mission statement down the road. I think telehealth is a topic we may want to talk about in the future as a trust in terms of how we can incentivize it more, how we can educate our members more about it. I have to say, as a guy who always not liked going to the doctor, but preferred a face-to-face encounter, I used telemedicine twice for the first time in my life. That doesn't make sense. Anyways, and I have to say, it was eye-opening, kind of enlightening. And I know my kids have been through it the same way, and my spouse. So I think it's one of those areas where we maybe want to spend some time in the future thinking through how we can make it more attractive and more, again, incentivize it more for folks. Thanks.
Are there any pathways out there for ESSER or COVID relief funding for insurers? That's probably not politically wonderful, but for school districts and employees, that would be helpful in this crazy budget time. I don't have any answers, but if you have any good ideas for how we could finagle something.
I'm actually reading through the most recent relief package, the healthcare provisions, trying to see where they might be relevant to us and to school districts. I don't see any money headed our way for claims purposes, but I think we probably, depending on the trajectory of the pandemic, we will probably continue to see regulators suspending cost sharing on some services that are related to the pandemic the way they did very early on. And also Blue Cross did a nice job opening up telemedicine to our members in a more sort of patient-friendly way, and in some cases without cost sharing. So I think that more of that may be on the way, or more of it, but I don't see any more money, unfortunately.
I'm wondering if districts would be able to use ESSER COVID relief funds to offset a portion of the premium contribution for these unanticipated COVID costs.
Well, that's an interesting
Help
question.
school districts on the other end with our tax rates, and it would help the ed fund.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
I think the problem I've seen, Tracy, is that because utilization dropped so much, I mean, we're having a meeting this week. I mean, it's people stop going to the doctor, so there's this
Yeah.
feeling like all these health plans made money off of COVID.
Yeah.
So it's really the only insurance we're actually seeing any kind of relief for is unemployment.
Okay.
Workers' comp's not getting it.
No, you're right. Politically, we'd never
Yeah.
get it.
I was just gonna say, it's something like even just the testing alone.
Yeah,
And this was a cost, an unanticipated cost that is present because of COVID. Here's this COVID emergency funds. We decided to not charge people for the tests. We want to have some of that money to help defray the
Yeah.
cost of that. That there might be an argument to be made just for that targeted
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
only.
well, Zach, with the vaccination, the feds are picking up the cost of the vaccination, but not the administration of it.
Same thing, right? We
right,
want all our
so-
members to
Right.
get a
The
vaccination.
Fed should be picking up the administration cost of that, so we don't have to bear it. But
I mean, those are
I'll think about how, Zach, you can help me think about how we could leverage that in, because we all have COVID relief funds to use.
yes.
And it helps the state on the whole. And they need help. How about the FY22 rates?
We don't have approved rates. We do have reason to believe that we're going to receive approved rates pretty soon. There was a little bit of discussion with the Visters rates when we submitted them. We made a change kind of once we realized that there was a large amount of, we've talked about the subsidization, and there was a large amount of early retirees because of COVID last year. So instead of having, say, 700 members, it jumped up 13%, which just caused the underfunding to be more of an issue. So we adjusted the rates a little bit for that. And Visters argued that they didn't think that that was reasonable. And DFR has written back saying that that has been approved as is. But they're just waiting to have a final conversation with Visters, I understand. So I'm expecting FY22 rates to come through anytime now.
Tracy,
Yes.
I'm back. I sent Bobby Joe a draft. I'm sure it's not going to be 100% satisfactory, but I attempted to accommodate what I think is just about as many interests as I could discern from a brief conversation. So when you're ready to get back to that.
Are we done with the rate approval update? Perfect. So do you have the capacity to post that? Go ahead.
I just sent it to her in an email format, so. Oops, that's easy to read, isn't it?
Let me see if I can make it bigger.
Well, yeah.
can you talk, the first,
I think we're still trying to enlarge it, right?
Yeah, I'll make it bigger. I'll
Okay.
put it in a Word doc.
Oh, good. Bravo. Thank you. Is that big enough for people?
I can read it.
All right. Should we give people a chance to read it, Tracy, or do you want to ask something?
I had started reading it, but we'll give people a chance to read it.
Hope I can come up with answers.
So can you explain your intent in item 3?
Yes, but before I do that, I want to point out that one of the interests mentioned throughout this that I didn't get in here is reference to the tight time frame. So that we might want to work on. You asked me what the purpose of 3 is.
Mhm.
Well, I think it's got there are multiple purposes, but this paragraph 3 is based on the not the operating assumption, but the potential assumption that in fact visitors will go with another provider, and what would be necessary for us if they do, for purposes of providing ongoing services to the younger set of retired teachers. And again, I'm not sure this accomplishes everything we want, but it's an attempt.
So you're saying we say to visitors, let me try summarizing. We value you. We believe that we can, through Blue Cross Blue Shield and VEHI, provide cost-effective and affordable health care. So basically through the MOU we submitted.
The joint bid.
And if you don't take the joint bid, we think you should keep the early retirees, the non-Medicare
65s.
eligible retirees with VEHI.
That's,
I think so. Yeah,
I'll just say that I feel like 3 is out of our sphere of, I have no doubts that they will make a decision about what's best for visitors, retirees and their families.
What? I don't understand what you said. I heard you.
Yeah, I don't know that we need to say number 3 because I think that is their mission and their responsibility to make sure that they represent those interests in a way that takes care of the enrollees.
I don't understand.
I don't think we need to say number 3.
doesn't
know
3
which
get
one.
the very point that Bobby Joe and I and Mark disagree on?
It doesn't say that.
Well, it says that if they choose someone else, they still should stay with us. But we have not authorized.
But what?
We haven't authorized that. We've not authorized. We only have the 2 bids. This would be saying basically we're right back to square one with this, the way I read it. Unless I'm reading it wrong, Bobby Joe.
John, I don't understand I just don't understand. Can you, Bobby Joe, can you try? I don't understand the point. I think I disagree
You're
with it.
saying that if Visitors determines to have another insurer other
Yeah.
than Blue Advantage, it should only do so if they continue with the VEHI program and that we work with the new carrier, which is exactly what this whole thing started with.
So you don't want to do that?
Not right now in 4 months. I would do it a year from now if they wanted to, but I wouldn't do it right now.
So, all right. Oh my God.
In my,
Where does that leave the,
Is there any opening?
where does that leave the
I'm sorry.
early retirees?
Well, if they want, Visitors can take our status quo bid, or they can take our bid that we put in with VBA. And we would be taking care of the early retirees. If Visitors decides they want to go somewhere else, then that means that Humana or Aetna had to have put in something else that will take the pre-65s. They're not going to be left without insurance. It might be a Humana plan, it might be an Aetna plan, and it might cost them a lot more. But the state, as I said before, is trying to split the baby. We are the best option for the under 65s, and they know that. And so if they want us, then they should take our second bid that we've worked on, that we have time to do, that we feel we can accomplish for July 1. And if they decide they don't like that, then they can go ahead and do another RFP next year and give us the courtesy of enough time to make it work with somebody else.
Well, I
So
guess.
I read your, I'm sorry, Tracy, may I speak?
Yes, you may. Thank you.
So I think I read your number 3 a little differently, and maybe it's just me.
Yeah.
What I see here in 3, again, I'm sorry, print small, so I'm struggling a little, but that if they choose not to go with VBA for the Medicare beneficiaries, that it would be Blue Cross they would choose to
Yes.
fund to cover the under 65s.
That's what I meant.
Okay, that's what I'm reading here. And that we would simply be part of helping them transition to July 1, and then we're out of the picture. Blue Cross would be the under 65 provider, if I'm reading this correctly.
So is this a new RFP where we say, is this still a new RFP where we say, well, we'll do a plan just for the under 65s?
You know, it may be the drafter's problem here. Well, I did not intend to sort of separate Blue Cross from us with respect to the young retirees. So if that's what I conveyed, I didn't mean it. I meant for us to continue in partnership with the Blues.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that, Mark, too. I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Is
All right, so
that
Joe,
what we bid? Did we bid something that allows the under 65s to stay with us and the over 65s to go somewhere else? We didn't bid that.
No.
They're not asking.
But it wasn't an option. It wasn't asked of us originally. That's
Well,
the
we talked
third
about it.
unknown.
We originally talked about it when we came to the board and when we decided not to put in a bid for just the under 65s.
Right.
Well, because we couldn't see the end game. Now Visitors is coming back and saying, we may see a different end game. Do you want to play differently? That's what's changed.
So I'm still we're willing to talk about a different end game, but not for July 1st. That's where my mindset is. So I would vote against this. Peggy?
Tracy, I mean, I really do see this as things having changed since our December meeting. Is there a way to find some common language that we can share that would include that request for a timeline extension? I hear people saying that it's an incredible amount of work and that the turnover is not smooth. Nobody is saying exactly what it would take to make that happen. And I know that it's very preliminary. We don't know where this will go. So energy may not have been put into that, but we're all doing things that are really challenging right now. And what, how challenging would this be? Does it mean new staff? What does it mean to have this turnover happen if it involved another company? That's what I'd like to hear a little bit of information about.
Tracy, may I respond? There's actually 2 dates that are relevant for this conversation. It's either July 1 or January 1. And to be honest, the management team would have preferred January 1, even with VBA. But because the savings are greater with the July 1 start,
Half a year.
we've been assuming that July 1 was going to be the start date. And I think we should probably assume that's what's on the table with another entity that's not VBA. However, Peggy raises an interesting point. We could say that we are amenable to this conversation with a new provider if the effective start date is January 1, which then gives us time to do the necessary homework, the MOU, et cetera, which I think we can do anyways now. But if more time is what John and Bobby Joe really need to see, perhaps putting that January 1 deadline out there gives us at least an opportunity for visitors to step back and rethink.
Again, my experience has been 1 to 2 years. So I don't know that January 1st is reasonable. July 1st, 2020.
Now, remember though, Tracy, that these plans aren't changing in benefits. They're exactly the same plan, except they're Medicare Advantage. It's not like a whole new set of plans. If we were doing a whole new set of plans, you're absolutely right. But this is the JY sub plan, exactly as it is today, with a Medicare Advantage wrapping. So that's where it's substantially different than what we went through before. And January 1 would actually give the management team more breathing space. I wanted that with VBA. I think John and Bobby Joe would have agreed as well that that would have been ideal.
Tracy,
and-
you're muted.
I'd be comfortable with a future date, not specified, because I don't think folks have had time to work out a timeline for that.
Well, at that point, why wouldn't they just rebid it? They have that
That's
option.
what I mean, rebid it.
But why go
Yeah.
through it? Why go through the trouble, John?
Because I know you like making copies.
Well, they're
Oh,
not,
yeah, right. Besides how much joy it brings me, right? Why would they want to do it again?
they're not going to do that.
They got 12 million on the table and maybe more than 12 million on the table, and they want to jump. So the question is, when do they jump? July 1 or January 1? And if we're really valuable to them for the under 65s and anything else we bring, like wellness to the 65 and overs, then maybe saying to them, you know what? We can probably do this on January 1. It's a whole lot tougher on July 1. Because it won't take 3 months to negotiate an MOU. It just won't. And especially because we've done most of our homework and we got a good lawyer in our corner. So the January 1 idea is actually one I hadn't thought about, honestly. It's an attractive option.
Once again, I feel like the team hasn't had a chance to talk about it, and again, I'm willing to talk about it in the future, but I'm not sensing that you guys have had an opportunity to really prepare and map out a timeline with an unnamed vendor. I
But
think,
remember, we were going to have to map out a timeline with VBA as well. We haven't done that with them either.
right, and our team is really concerned that we can pull it off with a vendor that has our data, knows us, that we already have financial arrangements with, so we can pay
But the-
them, all of those things. And honestly, Mark, you're not on the ground with that work. That's Bobby
No,
Joe
but
and Chris.
we don't,
That's Bobby Joe and Chris. So when they say it worries them,
we don't have a financial connection with the Medicare Advantage folks, except for how they want to pay the premium. We don't. The monies can't be commingled. CMS prohibits it. So
I
for us, it's all,
understand, but
for all
we
this
already-
us, it's administrative stuff that has to
Yeah.
be done.
Exactly.
It does seem like a lot in a hurry. And as a board member, even though I'm the newest to this, it just seems like I have so many, can this happen? Can this not happen? I'm not convinced it can happen to approve of anything by a set date without further thought. Just seems like a rush decision. Well, just hang on, Mark.
No, I'm listening.
It's rushed. It's like, again, I'm going to go back to the switching horses in midstream. We're too far down this stream to switch horses now. It doesn't mean that the next stream we come to, we can't get off and switch horses. That doesn't mean that at all. But I just think we're too far down this. It's too late a date to move this. I don't feel comfortable.
Okay, I get it. Just so you know that we're not submitting another bid. That's where the real work was. We just have to iron out these administrative functions with the third provider. That's what has to be done. And
Yeah,
we know what we have to.
And we all saw the disaster that happened a few years ago. And
Yeah, but
it
it's not
is
the
true
same-
that
it's
we
not the
have
same
an
thing, Gio.
obligation to the people who are getting these healthcare benefits to provide it in a way that the ship
Of course,
doesn't,
but
the
it's
train
not
doesn't
the
go off
same
the
thing as
rails.
2 years ago. They're the same plans.
But Mark,
There's
we
no
don't
new
even know who
plans.
the vendor is.
Yeah, but Bobby Joe, we know what we need to do with the new vendor. We've worked out the MOU. It's a question of sitting down and saying to them, do you want our wellness program? Yes or no? Would you like to help?
Chris has her hand up and so does Zach, so I want to pay attention to that. Chris?
Thank you. So we've gone a little bit past there, but I wanted to respond to one thing on Peggy's question about, the potential pitfalls, of moving quickly and what needs to happen. And one of my big concerns, I have several, but one big concern that I have is that, when Blue Cross Blue Shield has everybody's subscriber information in their system now, because they are covering these 7,000 individuals. So they know who they are. They have their relationship. They have their all their social security numbers in the system, all their dependents in the system. So in order to go to another provider, all of those people have to be re-enrolled in their system. And then you do have to come up with a new plan design because it's with a different carrier. So maybe it's the same plan designer, but that carrier still has to adopt that plan and apply it to those 7,000 people that are being enrolled in that plan. Honestly, in my experience, in my experience in working with this company for 20 years, it is too tight. And you know what? Bobby Joe and I were on the end of a lot of those phone calls when everybody was all upset about the transition.
So was I.
And Mark was too, exactly. It's not about the two sides here, guys. It's about us figuring out what's best for these retirees and using our best business judgment here. And I'm sorry, in my best business judgment, I know that Visters might not like us and they might want us to jump through hoops, but we've got to deal with the reality here. Do you really want, 6,000 or 5,000 or 4,000 people to slip through the cracks on July 1? And these are elderly people that need their health insurance who might have some struggles navigating the concepts around this. I work with some older people in my personal life that may or may not be as savvy to all this. So, the time is really important. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Chris.
Oh, it's going to be July 1 with VBA, Chris.
So,
At least they have our demographics and our subscriber information in their system.
I think that
Joel-
information can be
Joel
transferred.
has drafted a motion. We need to end in 2 minutes and we have some business we didn't get to at all, so I'll put that on to the next one. Do we want to vote on Joel's motion? Do we want to amend it, or I'll ask the three
A
trust administrators.
Point of
again.
order, we need a second on the motion before we can discuss the motion.
Right. I just don't know if Joel wants that motion made. Yes? Are you making the motion that you presented in writing?
I don't want this board to go on record as doing anything but by consensus in support of this. I think this becomes much less controversial as a motion if it in fact incorporates the very legitimate concerns about the time frame. I hadn't been sensitized to it earlier in the discussion, but certainly, and I don't know what the thinking is over at Visters about this rush. Well, they see dollar signs in their eyeballs. That I get, but they can't be permitted, frankly, to get away with, at least without somebody stepping up and saying, this is unrealistic and you're putting at risk a large assortment of people.
So let's have.
That said, I happen to believe that, January 1st is longer than is needed, but those are the two operational dates in the industry, I presume, something like that, in the health industry.
So are you posing your motion as written, Joel, and I'll get a second?
I think I made my point. I think it's worth considering, particularly if we add some statements regarding the time frame. And so that's my motion is
Okay.
motion with an additional reference to the unrealistic shortness of the time frame. And I just haven't written that, so.
Okay, is there a second to that? Peggy?
Yeah, I'll second it so we can discuss it some more.
Okay, so let's discuss the motion, please. Zach?
So I'm still, I would say I'm unclear. We're getting into this time frame is important, and there's a discussion of time frame. And we've got a difference of opinion on whether or not July 1 is a hittable time frame. I'm hearing it's a squeeze at the very least. Even the most optimistic appraisal, it's a squeeze, even but we're trying to make it with VPA. So I hear that. I haven't heard people give a definitive timeline on the other side of like how far out might be realistic. I know, Tracy, you referenced 1 to 2 years in plan rollouts, and Mark, you said it's a little bit different than that. It's not the same thing in terms of, so that might not be a good way to think about it. I haven't heard other members of the management team discuss a timeline other than to say, I think what I'm hearing is, I don't know because I don't even know who we're dealing with. So I wonder if we could go, I would be curious as they go back, push a little bit on the other members of the management team to talk about timeline. And if we were going to communicate something, what is the timeline that is wide enough that you would feel like, okay, we could hit that, whoever the hell it is, and whatever, excuse my language, whoever the heck it is.
It was English.
But whoever the heck it is, if it was blank, I'm confident that we could hit that timeline. I haven't heard what that other end of the equation is. So I'm hoping that maybe in terms of me supporting something that would indicate time, I kind of want to know where that range ends.
So we're going to operate on the assumption that one of these big national players wants to work with VEHI. So
Right.
let's assume that happens. I mean, I would feel like a year. You need a year, at least, if we were going to do it.
My suggestion and my answer in my version of the answers was, if sanctioned by the board, we would consider this at a later date. It doesn't tie us into any particular date. It just says that we don't have enough time. You asked us 2 months ago for an RFP. We gave you the answers, and now you're coming back and saying, let's swap all this out. Will you do it? There's just not enough time. So I would like to say, if the board agrees, we would consider it at a later date. And then we'd have to work it out with that vendor. We haven't talked to them to know anything about them.
Yeah, we need to do our due diligence and
Well,
make sure that, a Humana or an Aetna, maybe they're great in other parts of the country. Maybe things fall through the cracks. We don't know. Do you want to put, as Chris so eloquently said, do you want to put these people in this situation?
But they're going to be in a VBA situation, a Medicare Advantage situation, one way or the other.
With a
Right?
trusted
That's
vendor.
happening. But
They may
here's the
not.
thing. Here, of course they are. We're not going to get the status quo proposal. We know that. There's too much money on the table, right? John and Bobby Joe, this is for you. Do you really think we could not do this if Visters wanted to by January 1?
I'm not committing to a date. I'm not saying we couldn't. I don't know if we could or not. I just don't think we need to put a date in there.
How could it possibly take longer than that?
Oh, I can give you 10 reasons. They don't want to work with us. They have demands. They don't want our wellness program. We can't figure out how the money gets transferred. I mean,
But all those questions could get answered in February. And if they say no, then we're out of the picture, right? I mean, I don't know why.
And we're in March and we're down to 3 months to pull off a transition.
Visters has got to pull the trigger here, and they got to do it in February. They've already told us that. They have to make a decision in February.
and they'll make a decision, and if it goes wrong, they'll blame us.
No,
So we have a motion on the table, so Joel, were you working on an amendment to your motion?
Yeah, it's nothing elegant here, but what I was going to suggest was add this clause probably at the beginning of, well, we don't have it in front of us, probably pretty close to the top of that paragraph 3. And it would add another condition to all of this. Only if there is a much more realistic time frame within which to do so. That sounds awkward, but it fits, I think, within the existing wording. So if you look at the third line in 3 and just add that what I said. It should do so only if there is a much more realistic time frame within which to do so, and then comma, I guess, comma, and only if Blue Cross Blue Shield, if that probably slash VEHI, can continue to provide health insurance, et cetera. You know, that's on the fly here. That's where I would insert the time frame reference right up top.
So you,
It accommodates Bobby Joe's concern about
timeframe
not
question.
specifying a time frame, but at least it opens up the potential for visitors to come back to us and engage in a conversation about it.
So I would support all of that if the part where Blue Cross Blue Shield can continue. I can't tell if this is telling us that we are supposed to do a new bid right now and split Blue Cross Blue Shield. If it's saying, take the bids we put out and work with us in the future on other options, then I'm okay with it. But if what this says is we're developing a new plan, so if you want to go with Humana for your retirees, but then you want us to develop a plan for the Medicaid eligible retirees, but you want us to maintain the under 65 retirees, that's not something we've bid. We didn't respond to that in the RFP, and we did make a choice not to do that.
We made a choice not to do that because nobody was talking about separating them, I thought.
No, we talked about it.
We talked,
Well,
No. We didn't talk about doing it with a third party. We didn't know. We didn't have that conversation.
No, we talked about not splitting it.
We talked about a status quo and a joint proposal. That's what we authorized. And now a third option's before us. That's all I'm trying to say. It's a different, Visitors is saying, this is right in front of us right now. Can you help us? That's what they're asking.
but Mark, we did talk about that because we said, do we want to do a bid that is just the under 65s and work with somebody else? And we said, no.
That's not how I remember the conversation, John. I'm
That's how I
sorry.
remember it.
where is that? Where do we find that? Because I don't.
That was
I
Mark.
just don't remember the nature of the discussion.
Mark,
But I
Laura,
certainly
and
remember-
Bobby, Joe, and I.
Here it is, 7 o'clock, 7:07. We're past our end time, and we don't have the information we need to make a decision.
Tracy, you suggested that you were in total agreement with everything but, and I didn't quite understand what you meant. You didn't want the reference to a continuation of Blue Cross VEHI services to under 65s? Is that, that's what I think you meant. I don't know.
Everything after the word time frame, I
Every-
object to. Not because I don't want to serve them, but
Mhm.
because I don't want to split the bid and split our services at this point in the RFP process, and given what I know about the subsidization of the over 65s and the under 65s. We didn't bid for that. I don't want to create a new bid. I don't want to do that to the team. I don't want to do it to our employees. So
Tracy, just to be clear, it's not a new bid.
It's not a new bid. I don't understand the concept.
It's a question of services. What services will we provide in cooperation with another entity? It's not a bid. I couldn't survive
yeah,
another bid.
right. It's a P. It's a proposal, not a B.
Right.
Well, well, what if, forgive me, but I'm trying to accommodate Tracy here. So it would, the whole thing would read those first two lines up to whatever, only if there is a much more realistic time frame within which we can resolve a series,
Study and consider the option.
So I'm going to put on my school board hat and say, we're doing this all wrong. We don't discuss how to make a motion. the motion gets made and then we amend the motion. So we're all working on this motion and it's getting more and more confusing as the more we work on it. So I think Joel needs to get a motion out there, get a second, and then we can pick it apart if we want.
All right. So we've got the motion out there. Joel made it as it is here, and Peggy seconded it. And I would propose that we amend it. It has been amended by Joel. He made his own amendment, adding a clarification about a time frame.
And I'm assuming Peggy has a friendly agreement to that amendment.
Thank you.
We need to
Thank
check
you,
with her on that.
And I'd like to propose a friendly amendment to delete everything from time frame to the end.
And I have an issue with the reasonable time frame because we have administrators tonight who are, one thinks was a reasonable time frame that we can get this done by July 1st. Others don't feel comfortable giving a time frame even. So what is a reasonable time frame? I don't think we can even define it.
July 1 was going to be really tough for any bid. I'm not saying it's reasonable. I'm saying that's what Vistas wanted because of
Right.
the savings.
Thank you, Mark.
I think January 1 is reasonable, as Peggy suggested. That it can be done by January 1. There's no reason it can't.
But you're saying it also could be done by July 1st. It would just put the team under a lot of pressure.
Right. We're going to be under a lot of pressure anyways.
And John and Bobby Joe appear to disagree with that. So that's why I left it open without specifying a deadline. Tracy, for purposes of getting this done, I understand the sort of not only the wordiness, but the confusion left in people's minds by the last 5 lines of that paragraph. It was my first draft. A way to shorten it for purposes of getting past this might be to have it all read those first 2 lines plus only if there is a much more realistic time frame within which we can resolve a series of significant administrative issues. I mean, at this point, I don't think I can do anything shorter or more expressive of the general view.
If we were going to do something, I would want to do due diligence. I would want to talk to whether it's Humana or Aetna before they award anything to see if we can come to some kind of agreement before it's awarded. So I think there's always time to get it right. And this is not enough time.
None of us disagrees with getting it right. It seems to me that, I mean, based on just what I've heard here, there is a potential that we would be closed out of the discussion if we don't convey a willingness to consider working with an alternative provider for this group. And if that's wrong, then so be it, and we can go home. But it feels to me as though we're making an assumption that out of the goodness of their hearts, a major multinational insurance corporation is going to work with little old VEHI in Vermont for 5,000 people or whatever it is, without being required to. Am I wrong about that? I don't. If I am, then fine.
Well, I believe that Vistas wants VEHI to handle the under 65s because we are the best deal.
Then don't we have to say something to give Vistas the wherewithal to go to whoever it is, and I'm hoping it's still the Blues, to force it to work with us?
Well, if you want to do that, the way to accomplish it is say, we won't work with the Humana or Aetna, we'll only work with VBA. And then we force their hand and they have to pick our bid.
That goes well beyond what I said and probably, I don't know why you would do that. So I won't comment further.
You know, John, it strikes me that if we put in something along the lines of needing a lot more time, it starts a conversation with Vistas, right? It gets us in a room to have that conversation. And it may be that in the course of having that conversation, which will occur very quickly, because they have to make a decision, we'll know whether or not it's viable. But if they know that what's holding us back is the timeline, making reference to it, as Joel suggested, gives us the opportunity to figure out where they are in all this and to get a sense of who this provider might be. It opens the door for a conversation.
I don't understand how we can extend the RFP process. I feel like we're saying make a decision for this year. And if you want to discuss this for the future, we're here for you. And my hope would be they'd choose our current plan, our current RFP with the VBA, since it will save them money. And then we'll entertain conversations about other vendors for future years.
Right, but a take it or lose it offer like this, it's VBA or nothing, they could be nothing. We could be left with nothing. And at least
And if
least
that's better for Vermonters, then that's okay with me.
I don't think it is better for the under 65s. And I think at least we should try to get in the door for a conversation to see what they're thinking. Right.
Mark,
And then-
I don't understand what you think the difference is on how they would treat under 65s and over 65s. If you think that they're good enough for the over 65s, why aren't they good enough for the under 65s?
I'm not saying they aren't, but I like the idea of us continuing to serve the people we know and who know us.
Exactly, and that's
Right.
exactly what
And
we
I
want.
think if we say no, if we say it's VBA or bust, they may say, sorry, the savings are too great with Humana for us not to sort of go down a different track.
Can I,
That's right out of our mission statement. It says that if we are not, I don't have it in front of me, but if we're not the provider that can do that, then we shouldn't be doing it.
But I think we
So I
can be,
have
is
to
what I'm
leave
saying.
I have to leave in 4 minutes to do a pickup. So
well,
we can call the question. We should call the question on the motion as proposed, I believe.
yeah, and just one last comment.
Or we could take action to table it.
Well, you can do that, but it seems to me if we don't provide these folks with a motion of some sort, then they're stymied. There will not be. Yeah, John, you can't just submit something over Mark's objection or.
No, Mark and Bobby Joe and I will meet tomorrow and we'll deal with what the board passed last time and we'll answer those questions.
No, John, that's not sufficient.
That's what led us to tonight, obviously.
Right. That's why we're
That's your
here.
job, though. That's your job.
You're
That's
really,
not-
that's
So
not-
let's call the question.
Well, does the motion read the way I last suggested it?
I don't know.
I know, that's why. All right. So if you call the question, you might want to know what the motion is.
So
right?
it's in front of us.
No, it isn't. Not what well, I don't know what Bobby Joe. Oh, okay.
I haven't changed what you sent.
She added the line
I see that.
with a reasonable time frame.
Well, but that's not what I wrote. I wrote,
I don't have it.
I know, a much more realistic time frame. Reasonable is too mushy, right? Because they get to decide that. Time frame without the comma, within which we can, and we are VEHI, so we can resolve a series of very significant administrative matters. You know, what else can you say?
Due diligence.
Yeah, with due diligence, sure.
Yeah, I
Issue.
said
And is the
matters.
second part included or not, Joel?
I
Delete
thought,
that.
I don't know, I thought that was not only unobjectionable, I thought the Blues would appreciate it. Oh, no. Wait a minute, yeah, that we believe it's in the short and long-term interest of retired teachers and visitors for it to retain the status quo. I would just as soon keep it, but I'm not wedded to it. I thought it would be a sop to the Blues as I was drafting it.
You're talking about number 2.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. But the bottom of number 3 goes out.
Yeah.
What's in gray.
I understand. Right, that was my intent. And just to get us so that you guys have something to work with. And I don't, and that's your end. In fact, this gets you off the hook of answering the questions. Direct.
So,
Mark, I don't know if that's.
No,
right.
it's fine. Again, I think it keeps us in the conversation long enough to figure out what they're thinking and to see if it's manageable. It gets us in the door. It says to them, look, you got some serious issues here.
Well, and also, hopefully, depending on how that conversation goes, we might be able to gauge how much of this is a Hail Mary on their part.
Right.
You're right.
Hoping they're sucking us in to
Yeah,
do
right.
this when they know
Exactly.
we're probably like, there's no way we want this one group if we don't have the other.
Exactly,
And they're
Zach.
just hoping.
Yeah, it gets us in, we can figure out what they're thinking. That part of the problem with the communication to date from them, it's not been clear. This gets us into a conversation, which is
All right.
chiefly what I'm interested in.
So Tracy, I think the motion is in its entirety there. Bobby Joe added, and that's fine, and do our due diligence. I just, that's language that
That's a
doesn't
friendly
compute with me,
amendment.
that's all. Can you scroll down to
Peggy,
the
do you
top?
accept that?
Yep.
Thank you, Peggy. So do you want to keep that preamble? In light of our inability to reach a satisfactory conclusion, how to respond to several of the questions? We let them know that we can't answer them. And the reason is because we think the status quo is fine and that they have an unreasonable time frame and within which we have to address a whole series of matters and do our due diligence.
I think if we make this motion, Bobby, Joe, and John, or if we approve this motion, and Mark still have to work out the specific communications, and that's there, and they can do that.
Okay, but the preamble says we can't answer the questions. That's why I raised it for our consideration. If we can't, then fine, and you can use whatever other mechanism you want. But if you think now that you can respond to the questions, then we shouldn't have that preamble. That's why I suggested it, raised it.
So Joel, are you saying in this that you believe Vista should stay in the interests of retired teachers, stay with what they have now, and then give us time to look in the future in a reasonable time
Well,
and work something out?
I'm not sure the second part, but certainly the first part, if you look at item 2 there, that's what it
Yeah.
said.
All right, so
I
we're
don't-
actually in
I-
agreement. We think that they should stick with one of the bids that we put in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I prefer a longer version because that's in my nature, but item 3 is designed, I suppose, to at least get in the door so we can have a discussion if they go, if our interest in retaining the current status quo goes south.
Right, John, it's to Zach's point about whether this is a Hail Mary or something else. It gets
No.
us in the door.
Yeah,
Can we call the question? I really need to adjourn.
okay,
Call the question.
thank you.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay for now. I'm so close. But
you're so close to what?
Okay,
Saying yes?
thank you.
I don't know.
yes, I'm close to saying yes, but I'm not there.
Clearly, there's a lot more discussion that needs to happen if we're going to advance
All right.
around the details. We all need to understand what we mean and what we're voting on, and despite our best efforts, we simply couldn't do that tonight. We also didn't get to discuss Q2 report, so we'll put that on a future agenda, and I assume that the trust administrators will have an update for us on the RFP.
I don't know how we're gonna get there, but we're gonna talk about it tomorrow.
So there is further business, but no more time. I will declare our meeting adjourned. And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.